The door burst open before I even reached it. Two federal officers pushed their way inside, moving like they already owned everything in my apartment. Before I could ask what was happening, one of them grabbed my wrist and snapped cold metal around it. "Jenna Collins, you are under arrest for violating parole." My whole body went still. "That's not my name." Neither of them stopped. My neighbors were already peeking out through cracked doors as I was dragged into the hallway barefoot, still in yesterday's clothes. My heart was slamming so hard I could hear it. "I'm not Jenna. My name is Leah. Leah Collins." The officer glanced down at his file. Then he looked back up at me with empty, patient eyes like he had heard this kind of thing before. "You've been using that alias for a while now." Those words hit me like a bucket of cold water. This wasn't a mistake. Someone hadn't just borrowed my name. They had become me. My name is Leah Collins. And my sister tried to erase me. At the station, they laid everything out on a metal table in front of me. My driver's license. My social security number. My signature copied onto documents I had never touched. All of it tied to crimes I had never committed. Fraud. Identity theft. Parole violation. The papers were neat and official. Every single one had my name at the top, Leah Collins, but they described someone else's life. A life full of bad choices, broken rules, and criminal records stretching back 3 years. I kept telling them the same thing. These aren't my crimes. I have never been arrested. I have never been on parole. The officer across the table didn't even blink. He just slid another document toward me and tapped it with his finger. The signature at the bottom looked almost exactly like mine. Almost. As I stared at it, something cold settled into my stomach. Whoever had done this had been practicing for a long time. My identity hadn't just been stolen. It had been completely rebuilt from the inside out. I was given one phone call. My hands were shaking as I dialed my parents' number. I had been sitting in that cold room for hours, and all I wanted was to hear someone say they believed me. My mother, Donna, picked up on the second ring. "Mom, listen to me. Something terrible is happening. The police arrested me, but it's a mistake. It's Jenna. She's been using my name." There was a long pause. Then her voice came through, flat and careful. "Leah, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything. This is Jenna's doing. She has a record, Mom. She's been. Your sister already called us." My father Dennis's voice cut in from the background. "She said you've been unstable for months, Leah. That you've been saying strange things." My mouth went dry. "She's been struggling," my mother added softly, and I realized she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about Jenna. Defending Jenna. Even now. They had already chosen sides before I even made the call. I lay on the narrow cot in my holding cell that night, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept drifting back to when we were kids. Jenna had always been the one who caused trouble. In middle school, she was caught shoplifting twice. In high school, she got suspended for forging a teacher's signature. My parents handled both situations quietly behind closed doors. "Don't make a big deal out of this," my father would say. "You'll ruin her future." So nobody reported anything. Nobody held her accountable. And Jenna learned something important from all of that silence. She learned that there were no real consequences when our family was involved. That someone would always smooth things over and protect her name. What none of us realized was that the name she would eventually need to protect herself with wouldn't be her own. It would be mine. I had spent years staying quiet to keep the peace. In doing so, I had shown her exactly how easy I was to replace. The first Real warning came about 2 years before my arrest. I was checking my email one Monday morning when I noticed a credit alert I hadn't set up. A new account had been opened in my name. A store credit card. $40 charged and immediately paid off, small enough to ignore, but strange enough to notice. I called Jenna that same afternoon. "Did you use my information for anything recently?" I asked. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A comfortable one. "Leah, relax. It's probably just a glitch. These things happen all the time." I brought it up at dinner with my parents that weekend. My mother Donna waved her hand like I was being dramatic. "You've always been suspicious of your sister," she said. "Stop accusing her of things." So I dropped it. I closed the alert, monitored my account for 2 weeks, and when nothing else appeared, I convinced myself it was nothing. That was my biggest mistake. Because Jenna had just run her first test. And I had passed her exam for her. Looking back now, the visit made perfect sense. The morning before my arrest, Jenna showed up at my apartment without calling first. That alone should have set off alarms. She never just appeared. We hadn't been close in years, and any visits between us were always stiff and scheduled. But she walked in like nothing was wrong. Her hair was done. Her clothes were pressed. She looked polished in a way that felt rehearsed, like she had prepared for this moment. She hugged me at the door. Long and slow. "I miss you," she said quietly. "I feel like we never talk anymore." I remember thinking it was strange. Jenna wasn't a sentimental person. She didn't do soft moments or gentle words. But I let myself believe it. I thought maybe something had changed, maybe she was trying. We had coffee. She asked questions about my job, my apartment, my routines. I answered all of them. I didn't know she was memorizing me. She wasn't there to reconnect. She was saying goodbye to my life. The next morning, while I was still being held at the station, an investigator came into the room and sat across from me without a word. He opened a thin folder and slid a photograph across the table. I stared at it. The woman in the photo was Jenna. I was absolutely sure of it. But she didn't look like herself. Her hair had been cut and styled the way I wore mine, swept to the left just below the shoulders. Her makeup was light and natural, exactly the way I had always worn it. She was even holding her shoulders back the same way I did in photos. She had studied me carefully. My habits. My expressions. The small things that make a person recognizable. This wasn't just an identity theft. This was a performance she had been rehearsing long before that last visit to my apartment. She hadn't just stolen my name from a document. She had practiced being me in the mirror. The court-appointed lawyer they gave me was named Mr. Hartley. He was tired-looking, with reading glasses he kept pushing up his nose and a stack of other cases sitting right next to mine. He listened to me for about 4 minutes before he leaned back and let out a long, slow breath. "Look, Leah, I understand you're upset. But identity swaps, real ones where someone completely takes over another person's legal life, those are extremely rare. The courts don't just accept that kind of story without hard proof." "Then help me find the proof," I said. He tapped his pen on the table. "What you're describing would take months to investigate. Resources we don't have. And right now the evidence on file says you are Jenna Collins." I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not Jenna. I have never been Jenna. And if you won't help me prove that, then I'll find someone who will." He didn't respond. That silence told me everything I needed to know. Later that same day, after Mr. Hartley had gathered his papers and left, one of the junior officers lingered in the doorway of the room I was being held in. His name tag said Scott. He was young, maybe mid-20s, with sharp eyes that kept moving between my face and the folder in his hands. He didn't speak right away. He just stood there, turning a page slowly, like something was bothering him and he couldn't quite figure out what it was. Finally, he said, "You mentioned your sister has a prior criminal record." "She does," I said. 2 counts of fraud 3 years ago. She served time." He flipped back to an earlier page. His eyes moved across it slowly. Then he looked up at me. "The physical description in this file," he said quietly, "doesn't match the parole photo we have on record for the name Jenna Collins." He wasn't accusing anyone. He wasn't making promises. But for the first time since the handcuffs clicked on, I felt something small flicker inside my chest. Hope. I was released on bail 2 days later, pending further review of my case. The moment I walked out of that building, I stood on the sidewalk, breathed the cold air, and made a decision. I was going to stop fighting. On purpose. Not because I was giving up. Not because I believed for even 1 second that the situation was fair. But because I had watched what happened when I fought. I argued, I cried, I explained, and nobody listened. Every emotional outburst was used against me, filed as evidence that I was unstable, just like Jenna had told everyone. So I was going to change my approach. If Jenna wanted to be me, I was going to let her. I was going to give her room to breathe, room to get comfortable, room to get careless. People who believe they've won stop being careful. They get loud. They get reckless. They leave traces. And when Jenna left hers, I was going to be ready. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was building a case. With internet access and time, I began to quietly dig. Using public records requests and online databases, I started pulling together a timeline. Bank activity logs showed repeated transactions tied to my social security number. Charges in cities I had never visited. At times I could prove I was somewhere else entirely. The IP addresses linked to my online accounts told a similar story. Someone had been logging in from different states, different devices. The pattern was sloppy. Whoever it was had been careful enough to avoid doing anything dramatic, but not careful enough to cover every track. There were gaps, overlaps, mistakes, little cracks that only made sense if two different people had been using the same identity at the same time. I printed everything, organized it by date, put it all in a folder. Then I did it again the next day. And the day after that. I didn't know exactly how I was going to use any of it yet. But paper trails don't lie. And Jenna's was growing longer every single day. There was only one person I trusted enough to call. Kate. We had been friends since college, the kind of friendship built on honesty, not convenience. Kate had met Jenna a few times over the years and had never liked her. She once said Jenna had hollow eyes. I'd laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing anymore. Kate picked up on the second ring. I need your help, I said. I explained everything. The arrest. The documents. The photo of Jenna styled to look like me. She listened without interrupting, which meant she was taking it seriously. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. This is Jenna, she said. Not a question. A statement. I knew something was off. She called me 6 months ago asking about you. Your work schedule. Your apartment. She said she was worried. My stomach dropped. She wasn't worried about me, I said. No, Kate replied quietly. She was mapping you. She didn't hesitate after that. Tell me what you need, she said. I'm in. 2 weeks after my release, I drove to my parents' house to ask them one question. Would they testify on my behalf? My father Dennis opened the door. He looked tired. I sat across from both of them at the kitchen table and explained what I had found. The bank records. The IP logs. The photo discrepancies. I laid it all out clearly and calmly. My mother Donna folded her hands in her lap. Leah, she said slowly, your sister has already been through so much. So have I, Mom. I was arrested. In handcuffs. In front of my neighbors. My father cleared his throat. We just don't want to make things harder for her. For her. Not for me. For Jenna. I sat there for a long moment looking at the two people who raised me. Then I stood, picked up my folder and walked to the door. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just let them go. Some doors close quietly. That one did. While I was piecing things together quietly from my side, Kate was watching Jenna from hers. The picture she built was difficult to sit with. Jenna wasn't hiding. She wasn't lying low or keeping a quiet profile like someone afraid of getting caught. She was living. Fully, openly, carelessly as me. She had taken a job under my name at a small logistics company 2 cities over. She had signed a lease using my credit history. She was attending social events, introducing herself to strangers, building relationships. All as Leah Collins. Kate found her social media profile. A private account with a handful of followers. The profile photo showed a woman who looked almost exactly like me, if you didn't know us both. Same hair. Same style. Even the same kind of backdrop I used in photos. I scrolled through it slowly, feeling something I couldn't quite name. It wasn't just violation. It was something colder. She hadn't stolen my name because she needed an escape. She had stolen it because she wanted my life. It was Kate who found it first. She had been checking security footage from the building where Jenna had signed the lease under my name. The property management company had cameras in the lobby, and Kate had a contact who helped her access a short clip from the day the papers were signed. In the footage, Jenna stood at the front desk filling out paperwork. The clerk passed her a clipboard. Jenna picked up the pen, signed, and then paused for just a second before finishing. I watched the clip 3 times. Then I pulled out one of my own signed documents and held them up side by side. There it was. In my signature, I always connected the L, Andy and Leah with a small upward loop. A habit since middle school. Completely automatic. Invisible unless you knew what to look for. Jenna's version had the loop curving downward. It was tiny. Subtle. Most people would never catch it. But it was wrong. And it was caught on camera. That was our entry point. I found Susan through Kate, who had heard her name from a colleague going through a difficult legal situation of her own. Kate passed the number along without pushing. Just a quiet suggestion. I called that same evening. Susan was sharp in a way that cut through the noise immediately. She didn't need me to explain things twice. She asked precise questions, listened carefully, and took notes without making me feel like I was being dramatic. "You don't prove innocence in a case like this," she said at the end of our first meeting. "Innocence is hard to prove. What you prove is impossibility, that it was physically and legally impossible for you and Jenna to be the same person at the same time." I nodded slowly. "The signature discrepancy is interesting," she added, flipping through my folder. "But we need something the court can't dismiss. Something airtight." She closed the folder and looked up. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. Then we set the trap. Susan moved quickly and quietly. She filed a series of discovery subpoenas, requests for records that Jenna didn't know were being gathered, bank statements, employment records, security access logs from the apartment building and the company where Jenna worked as me. While that played out through official channels, we built the second layer of the trap. We didn't confront Jenna. We didn't tip her off. We just kept watching, kept collecting, and kept letting her feel safe. Susan explained it clearly. "We need Jenna to keep operating as you publicly. Every time she does, she adds another link to the chain. The more links, the stronger the case." Kate continued her surveillance from a distance. No contact with Jenna, nothing that could alert her. Just quiet observation and careful documentation. Meanwhile, Susan reached out to a forensic document examiner, an expert who could compare signatures scientifically and produce a court-admissible report. Piece by piece, the trap was being assembled. All we needed was for Jenna to walk into it. She was getting closer every day. The moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks before my hearing. Kate sent me a link, a local business networking event with a public check-in page. Leah Collins had registered. I stared at the screen. Then I called Susan. "She's going to attend a public event as me," I said, "in front of witnesses." Susan's response was calm and immediate. "Don't go. Don't send Kate. We need independent witnesses, not anyone connected to your case." Instead, Susan arranged for a private investigator to attend. He blended in, stayed quiet, and documented everything. Photos, video, a list of every person Jenna introduced herself to as Leah Collins. She signed the event sign-in sheet. She gave her name to the event coordinator. She shook hands with 14 people who now believed they had met Leah Collins. She had performed my identity in front of a room full of strangers, and every single moment was on record. She had just handed us the most powerful piece of evidence we had. With 2 weeks left before the hearing, Susan brought in the final piece. She had quietly submitted a formal request for fingerprint comparison. Since Jenna had been arrested and processed under her own name 3 years earlier, her fingerprints were already on file in the state database. Mine were not. I had never been arrested, never been processed, never had any reason to be in the system. The examiner ran the comparison. The fingerprints in the current case file, the ones attached to the parole violations and fraud charges, matched Jenna's prints from her original arrest. Not mine. There were no prints of mine anywhere in the criminal record built under my name. 2 people. 1 identity. 1 set of fingerprints, and they belonged to my sister. Susan slid the report across her desk toward me. "This," she said quietly, "is the nail." I read through it slowly. Science doesn't bend. Science doesn't protect anyone. It just tells the truth. And the truth was that Jenna had run out of places to hide. The morning of the hearing, I arrived early. I wore a dark blazer and kept my hair simple. Susan had advised me to look calm and composed. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be read as aggression or desperation. I followed that advice exactly. I spread my folder on the table in front of me. The fingerprint report. The signature analysis. The private investigator's documentation from the networking event. The bank records and IP timeline. Everything organized. Everything dated. Everything real. Then the door opened. Jenna walked in. She looked polished, confident, dressed carefully, rehearsed, performing. just like she had been the morning she came to say goodbye to my life. She glanced around the room and her eyes landed on me. For a half-second she froze. I held her gaze and didn't look away. She recovered quickly, smoothed her expression back to neutral, and sat down at the table across the room. But I had seen it. The crack. She had not expected me to be standing there steady and prepared. The hearing began, and Jenna's lawyer presented their case first. I sat quietly through all of it. I watched Jenna speak with her lawyer in low whispers. I watched her face stay composed and controlled. I had to admit she was good. She had spent years performing and it showed. Then Jenna herself was asked to speak. She stood, smoothed her jacket, and looked directly at the judge. "Your Honor," she said, "I am Leah Collins. The woman seated across from me is my sister Jenna. She has been attempting to take my identity for months. Everything she has presented is fabricated." The audacity of it hit the room like a cold wave. She pointed at me without blinking. "She is impersonating me," she said. "And she is using my distress to cover up her own criminal history." I didn't react. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Susan rested her hand briefly on the table between us. A quiet signal. Not yet. Let her keep building the lie. The higher it rises, the harder it falls. Jenna continued for almost 20 minutes. She described a version of events where I was the unstable sibling. Jealous, difficult, obsessed. She talked about my pattern of false accusations, my history of mental instability, and the years of supposed trouble I had caused the family. She wove it carefully. Each detail connected to the next. Every claim built on the one before it. The whole time I just watched her. I watched the way her hands moved when she spoke, slightly too controlled. I watched her eyes, which almost never blinked. I watched her jaw tighten each time she paused to choose her next word. I had lived with Jenna for the first 18 years of my life. I knew every tell she had. And every single one of them was firing. She wasn't confident. She was desperate. Desperate people say too much. Susan was already writing on her notepad. When Jenna finally sat down, Susan leaned toward me. "Ready?" she said quietly. I nodded once. "Then let's end this." Susan presented the evidence in a specific order. First, the bank records and IP timeline, showing two different people using the same identity in two different locations at the same time. She walked the judge through each date, each location, each overlap. Then the forensic document examiner's report. Two signatures compared scientifically, side by side. One authentic. One a copy with a single small flaw. The loop in the L curving the wrong direction. Then the private investigator's documentation. Photos. Video. A signed event sheet with Jenna's fingerprints on it, taken from the clipboard at the networking event. Then the fingerprint comparison report. The room went very quiet. The judge studied the documents for a long time without speaking. Jenna's lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something. Jenna shook her head, but her hands were gripping the edge of the table. Then the judge looked up and asked a single question. "Miss Collins, which of you was incarcerated in this facility between March and August 3 years ago?" Jenna opened her mouth and closed it again. The judge didn't need Jenna to answer. The fingerprints answered it. The records answered it. The timeline answered it. The signature answered it. Every piece of evidence pointed to the same person. That person was not me. Jenna's lawyer requested a recess. It was denied. The judge ordered an immediate cross-comparison of Jenna's original criminal record, filed under her own name 3 years ago, with the parole file built under mine. The prints matched. The timeline matched. The physical description in the original record matched Jenna, not me. Within an hour, the charges against me were dropped. Within 2 hours, Jenna was taken into custody. I watched them lead her out. She kept her chin up and her eyes forward, still performing even now. My parents sat in the back of the room. Donna had her hand over her mouth. Dennis was staring at the floor. For the first time, there was no version of events left for them to hide behind. The truth was the only thing in the room, and it wasn't going anywhere. I didn't scream when it was over. I didn't cry. I stood outside the courthouse in the afternoon sun, breathing slowly, letting everything lift off my chest. Kate was waiting on the steps. She didn't say anything. She just hugged me and I let her. My parents came out a few minutes later. My mother looked like she had aged 10 years in one morning. She started toward me, but I shook my head. Not now. Not today. Maybe not ever. Some wounds don't close by talking. In the weeks that followed, I changed my address, changed my phone number, and spent 3 months untangling every thread Jenna had woven through my life. It was slow. It was exhausting. And it was necessary. But for the first time in a long time, the work felt like mine. Like I was building something real, something no one could borrow or steal or pretend to be. I wasn't erased. I never had been. I was just finally ready to live like I believed that.